In this tutorial, I will show how to read data into R. And when I say read data into R in the context of R or RStudio, I mean to import data from a particular folder on your computer or somewhere else, and this could also be from a website or another location, and then bringing it into the R global environment so then we can work with those data. So as with any R session, let's be sure that we don't work in our console specifically. The console's great for output, but it's not where we'd like to, it's not a good way to save our work or anything like that. So let's start off by going to File, New File, R Script to open up a script editor, or in other words, our R Script file, which has that .r extension. And so it'll open up a new window pane here in RStudio, and you'll see that it's currently untitled. So let's go ahead and do a save as, and I'm going to save this to a location of my choosing, and I'm going to call it just test for the sake of demonstration here. So save, it's going to say this already exists. Do I want to overwrite it? Okay, let's do that. I don't recommend that you do that for yours, but for this demonstration, it'll be fine. So the other thing that we want to note next is, okay, we presumably have saved data into our working directory folder. And specifically, in our working directory folder, we should have saved, which in my case is our workshop, which is in my H drive here. So if you click here, you can see H drive, our workshop here. I have saved in a bunch of different data here, but the one I want to work with today is called PERS data with a capital P and a capital D. Okay, so I want to be sure to read these data into R here. Okay, and so, but first to do that, I need to set my working directory to tell R where to find these data, what folder I'm going to use as my working directory. So R will by default look in this folder for this data. Okay, so let's remember here that it's a capital P and a capital D for PERS data, which stands for personal data. And also notice this is a .csv file or a comma separated values file here. Okay. All right, so in order to figure out what our working directory currently is, let's do get working directory just to find out, okay, is it set currently? If so, what is it? Is it where we want it to be? And we can use the getwd function from base R here. We don't need to put anything in the parentheses as an argument. We can just simply run that function. Lo and behold, actually the working directory folder I have and I want and where the data are actually saved, that PERS data.csv file is actually already set. But let me show you how you would quickly set your working directory. If you have any questions about how you would set your working directory or want more information, check out the tutorial called Setting a Working Directory in R. So let's set our working directory. And this is one way that you can do it. We can use the setwd function, which is all lowercase setwd. And in the parentheses as the sole argument, we're going to enter the name of our working directory folder, which is, in my case, my H drive, :/R workshop. Now, likely this will be different for you. Almost certainly this will be different for you. So you just need to enter whatever the path extension is for your particular working directory folder or what you're going to treat as your working directory. Okay. And so if I put this in and I can highlight this or put my cursor next to that line and I click run, it sets my working directory here. And you can get verification that it worked if you go to getwd, run this function once more, you see, yep, it's still working. It's still my correct working directory, that R workshop folder, or you can look to your console window here. Alternatively, if you go to session, and many of you might prefer this, if you go to session, set new working directory, you can choose your working directory. And you can do this the old-fashioned manual way as well by just selecting the folder via traditional drop-down menu. Okay, so again, the focus is going to be reading data into R. Is the focus of this particular tutorial today. I'm going to show you 3 different functions that you can use to read data in. You can use whatever function you wish, but I'll actually point you towards one of them as one I think I would advise you as using moving forward. And so the 3 functions are going to be read.csv, read_csv, and then read with a capital R. Okay, so let's start with the read.csv function. Okay, so we'll call this option 1 here. Okay, so for the first one we can do, and this is going to come from base R, meaning that we don't need a special package in order to access the read.csv function. We just type in read.csv, get our parentheses there, and as a sole argument, we would just type in the exact name, and this is important, it needs to be the exact name, and R is case and space sensitive, the exact name of that data file as it's named in our working directory folder. So if you remember from the beginning of the tutorial, it was called pers data with a capital P and a capital D. We don't stop there though, we need to put the .csv extension on the end as well, and put this all in quotation marks there. Okay, so R is case and space sensitive, so if there's a space in the name of the file, you need to include it here, and if there's capital or lowercase letters, they need to appear exactly as they are, otherwise R will not recognize it. So what happens if we just run this line of script or code here? Well, we can highlight it and click run, and here you'll see we've read in the data, so we can see the data here. We can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables or fields, and below each one of them we have our data. So the top row is our variable names or field names, and below the rows are each line of data. Okay, but what this does is it just allows us to see the data. Now, what if we want to work with or manipulate the data? Well, I should note at this point that anything we read into the R global environment means that, or anything that we read in general like this, we're not actually doing anything to the source data. The data in our working directory folder are going to remain the same. So this is one of the great things about R. We can manipulate, we can drop cases, we can do all sorts of things within the R environment, but we're not actually changing the source data. This is an awesome thing about R, and we can create this paper trail within the R script editor here in which we describe why we're dropping cases and so forth. And we can recreate this every time we open the R session without actually changing that source data. This is great from a data integrity standpoint here. Okay, so, but what you'll notice is that we don't have an object here in our global environment. And our objects are going to be anything that we've named or has been named for us that we can then reference as part of our in our functions or do operations with and so forth. So as a basic example, I'm just going to type this into the console here because I don't want to save this. But let's say I do a variable assignment. So I do X and then I do the left-handed arrow here, which is just the less than symbol with a hyphen next to it or a dash. And I'm going to assign 3 to X, and I hit enter here. And now you see that I've actually done a variable assignment. X is equal to 3. You see that in our global environment. And then that means that I can reference this at a subsequent moment in time. Let's say here, and I'm going to do print X. And down here in the console, using the print function from base R here, and then just put X as the sole argument, hit enter, and here I can work with that function, work with that object that I've created here in this global environment. Well, we want to do the same thing with the data frame that we read in. And so when you read data from an external source into the R environment, it's very common for these to be read in as a data frame, which is like a table, except that a table can have some additional functionality and features to it. But typically a data frame is like a data file where the data are organized in rows and columns. Typically the columns are the variables and the top row is going to represent the variable names, sometimes called field names if you're working within a database management system. So how do we read this in as an object that we can subsequently reference like we did over here with the variable X? Well, in order to read this data frame in as an object that we can work with next, we use that left-hand symbol here. Alternatively, you could use the equal sign. I prefer to use the left-hand symbol here, so it's the less than with the dash or the hyphen there. And let's just name this something. So I'm going to name this PD, okay, for pers data here. You could call it whatever you want. You could call it pers D, you could call it PD, you could call it anything that you want. Just make sure that it doesn't start with a number and that it doesn't have spaces within it. I like to keep them short or relatively short, but also informative. So here I'm going to just remember that PD with a capital P and a capital D, because R is case and space sensitive, that this is the name of the data frame object here. So I'm saying read in the data and name this data frame object that we read in as PD. Let's highlight this and click run. And lo and behold, look what we have in our global environment here. You can see 9 observations, so that means rows, and then 5 variables, okay? And if you click here on the arrow, you can get some basic information about the structure of the data frame, okay? And what I mean by being able to reference this later is let's look at that structure through a different avenue using the str function from base R, which stands for structure. And so let's use as the sole argument here the name of that data frame object we just read in here. So it's capital P, capital D. highlight this, click run, we get the same information that we saw over here. Okay, so it gives us basic information about whether it's an integer or the data type or the variable type for each variable. Here we see ID is an integer. The last name variable is actually of type of factor, which is of type factor, which is similar to a character type of variable or data. Now, also remember, R is case and space sensitive, so we do str and lowercase pd, and we click run. Object PD not found. So R doesn't recognize that. So remember, everything is case and space sensitive here. Okay, so this is one way we can read in R. It's a quick way we can do it. Now let's use the read underscore CSV function. So this is going to be option 2, or what we'll call option 2. Now, we can actually, we're going to use the function will look, and the argument will be, everything will be virtually identical as we did above with one minor difference. We're going to have to slightly change the name of the function here. So let's go ahead and copy this whole line here, paste right here. And so actually all we're going to change is the period or the dot here. Change this to an underscore. And now we have read underscore CSV. But we're not quite ready yet, because more than likely at this point, you haven't yet installed the reader package, which is where this read underscore CSV function is from. So this is an outside package that doesn't come by default within R when you download it. So therefore, you need to install this package to your computer, and then we'll need to access the package in order to use the read underscore function that is part of that package. So in order to do that, you would use the install packages function here. And within the parentheses, we've got it down a line here. Let's bring this back. Within the parentheses here, in quotation marks, we are going to put reader. This is the name of the package here. So we put this in quotation marks within the parentheses here, and it's reader, all lowercase, reader without an E. Okay, and this is from the tidyverse package set of packages, which is this constellation of packages that are really great for doing data management work and data science in general. Okay, so the first thing you would do is specify that you want to install this package to your computer if you haven't already, and then we would use the library function to access the reader function here. Okay, or the reader package rather. All right, so if we do the install.packages. I'm not actually going to run this because I already have just updated this, and to save time, I won't run through this, although it doesn't take too long to do this in general. But this is, you would first run this line if you've never installed the package before, or if you need to update this package. But what I'm going to do is just run the library function. And what the library function does is it assumes you've already installed this package, and just like a library, you need to check this package out so that then you can use the functions that are from that package. So you're accessing the package in making it readily available in the R environment, so then you can reference functions within that package, such as the read underscore CSV function here that we're about to use. So let's just select that line of script or code here. Click run. Okay, we see it all worked. Library, reader, it read in. Now let's use, again, we're just gonna use the exact same line of script as above, except we're just changing out the name of the function here from read.csv to read underscore CSV. And we're gonna name the new data frame object the exact same thing, PD with a capital P and a capital D, which will just override the existing data frame object. Now, depending on what your situation is, you might want to do this or you might not want to do this. For our purposes, it won't really matter. So let's go ahead and run this selection here. Okay, and here you get some red and green text here, and so it's just giving you some information about how the data were parsed in here, but it's going to appear very much like what we did before. So we actually overwrote it, and here you'll see that we have 9 observations and 5 variables. And so we can actually use the print function here to view this in our console just to make sure that it read in successfully. So let's do print capital with the sole argument being the name of our data frame object that we can reference here in the parentheses. So remember, the print function is from base R, and let's click run, and there you go. See, the only thing that will look a little bit different is if you scroll up through our output here, we initially read in the data. Notice that you have the name as the first rows of the variables, and then it goes immediately into the rows of data. When you read it in a data frame and read in a data frame object using the read underscore CSV function from the reader package, you'll actually get this additional row here that provides the type of data that each column represents. And so what you'll also notice here is that this is one of the reasons I like the reader function a little bit better, or rather the read_CSV function from the reader package, is that it tends to read in the data in the type that you actually want. And so if you remember previously when we looked at this, we also ran the structure function, you saw factor here for these variables. Well, now we have character, and character tends to be a little bit easier to work with, or it's usually what we want to work with. And so this is another advantage. Now notice too, it actually is technically not a data frame, it's actually a tibble when you read it in through the read_CSV function. And this is just fine. The tibble has some additional information like this, and it works just like a data frame. This is why I really recommend that you use the read_CSV function. It also tends to be faster when you have larger amounts of data. It tends to work faster. Now we're only talking about 9 rows of variable, or 9 observations and 9 rows of data and 5 variables. Very small data frame here. But if you're reading in a much bigger data file, this can really help you out here using the read_CSV function from the reader package. Okay, finally, the last function I'm going to show you that you can use to read in data is called the read, and this is a capital R for read function, and this is actually from the lessr package, and we'll call this option 3. Okay, and so, well, first, if you haven't already, you would need to install packages, and you need to install the lessr package because this is where this particular read function comes from. Okay, I've just recently done this, so I'm not going to actually reinstall lessr. But I will use the library function here to access the lessr package, to check it out, if you will, in order to look and use this read function that comes from the lessr package. Okay, but before we do that, I am going to just run this line of script here for the library function, so we can make sure that we have access to the library associated with lessr, those library of functions associated with the lessr package here. Okay. All right. The next thing that I'm going to do is let's just borrow and copy this original line here of script. And so paste it down here. And let's replace the name of the function with just read with a capital R. So no CSV at the end here. And this is the name of the package. And that was a little delayed here, but here's the just the loading information for that lessr package here. And so the name of the function here is read. And actually you see that noted here in this initial starting point here. And so what we're going to do is we are going to read in the data using this particular function here. And the way that you would do that is that you would just highlight this and you would read it in as whatever you want to call it. And we'll say PD here, and then you'd click run, and the same thing happens. I'm not going to do that here just for the sake of demonstration. It's easy to do. And part of the reason is because I just want to emphasize that I really do recommend that you use this read_CSV function from this point forward from the reader package. But if you do find yourself reading in data from other types of data files that aren't CSVs, such as maybe a SAS data file format or something like that from another statistical software package, this read function can handle that pretty easily. Okay, so this is how you can read in data into your global environment in R. And you can also check out your data too. So in terms of how you want to view the data frame, you can do things like the view function, which is with a capital V from base R, and you type in the name of your data frame within the parentheses as your sole argument. You click run, it'll open up a new window here or tab that will show your data here, and you can actually sort it and so forth, just like you would in Excel. Alternatively, if you just click on the name of it here in the global data environment, it does the same thing. In fact, you see that it generates that same script below here in your console as the output. Now, another thing that's useful too is what if you just want to look at the first 6 rows of data? Well, then you can use the head function, that's all lowercase, HEAD, and the name of your data frame as the argument that we enter into the function, and we run that. I did a control enter there because I'm working from a Windows. And here we can see the first 6 rows there just in our console. Similarly, you can look at the last 6 rows, and this is when we'd use the tail function, so head and tail. And as our sole argument, we use the name of our data frame object, which here is capital P, capital D, PD. And let's run that selection there, and we see we get the last 6 rows there. And what if you want to know the names of variables in your data frame? Well, then we just use the names function from lessR. It's all lowercase, NAMES, and the name of our data frame within the parentheses as our sole argument. We run that, and we get the list of variable names here. This comes in handy if you want to reference those variable names later on. And then finally, if you want to know the number of rows of your data frame, not including the variable row at the very top, the variable name row, is number of rows. You can use the in_row function here from baseR and the name of your data frame in the parentheses, and we can run that selection, and you'll see that we have 9 rows. In this case, it corresponds to 9 unique employees in this data frame here. Okay? So this is how you read data into R. And so there's different ways that you can do it. Again, I recommend the read_csv function from the reader package, which is part of the tidyverse universe of packages that are great for data science. Thank you very much.